Hi everyone, Robert Kajiwara here. This is a presentation on China-Loochoo relations done as part of the Master of Asian International Affairs program at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. Because of the current coronavirus pandemic, this will be a virtual presentation done via Zoom. This is just a brief introductory overview of China-Loochoo relations. I'm not going to go too far in depth into any one particular topic because I think most of my audience is probably not that familiar with it, so I don't want to overwhelm you. But I will be going more in depth in subsequent videos and lectures and articles. I am president of the Peace for Okinawa Coalition. My petition to help save Okinawa's democracy and coral reef and calling for a immediate stop to the construction of the illegal military base at Hinoko, Okinawa, has over 211,000 signatures on it. I have long been calling for more Loochooans to be involved in scholarship and to be involved in Loochoo studies at the academic level. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries so far, Loochooans have really been pushed out of academia. It's primarily been American and Japanese scholars who have dominated the study of Loochoo studies during this time. And so a lot of them, unfortunately, have really propagated false information about Loochoo. Not all of them, but many of them, probably most of them, have done a very poor job of writing and discussing Loochooan studies, which has really hurt Loochooans. So we as Loochooans really need to regain control of our own narrative. So as a Loochooan, I primarily use the historical Loochooan sources, which you will see at the end of my presentation. A lot of the Japanese and American scholars that I was referring to do not use the historical Loochooan sources, but rather they tend to use secondary sources, a lot of which are actually written in Japanese or even European languages. This helps explain why they propagate so much false information, because the sources they are using are secondary sources. They're not even using primary sources. And a lot of that is because they don't even speak the Loochooan languages. So they're not even able to read or access the sources. So on the right is a map made by the Okinawa Prefecture government. On the left is a chart that I made of the distances in kilometers of some major or otherwise noteworthy cities or destinations from Naha, which is the largest city of Loochoo. So as you can see with this chart, Loochoo is conveniently situated in between many different important countries and cities. This convenient geographical location has allowed Loochoo throughout most of our history to thrive via trade and cross-cultural exchange. A lot of people have a misunderstanding that Loochoo or Okinawa is near Japan, but in actuality, it's not that near to Japan. It's actually much closer to China. Throughout most of Loochoo's history, it was Fuzhou, the city of Fuzhou, China, which was historically often known as Ming, that has served as the closest and most important trading partner and cultural exchange partner for Loochoo. Relations between Loochoo and the people of Fuzhou date back to time immemorial, before there were even written records. As you can see, Fuzhou is much closer to Loochoo than any major Japanese city, particularly during historical or pre-modern times, and it's much, much closer to Loochoo than Tokyo is. In fact, even other major cities such as Pyongyang, North Korea, and Manila of the Philippines are closer to Loochoo than Tokyo is. And for those who may be wondering what's the difference between Okinawa and Loochoo, Loochoo refers to the entire Loochoo Island chain. Loochoo is also the name of the country. Okinawa is simply the largest and most populated island in Loochoo, and in the Loochooan languages, we refer to Okinawa as Uchina. So Okinawa is actually a modern Western and Japanese name. It's actually not even a Loochooan name. Uchina is the proper Loochooan name. So here's an old map drawn by the Chinese documenting the trade routes, the historic trade routes between Fuzhou and Loochoo. On the left, the large island you see there, that is Uchina Island. And on the right, you see China and specifically Fuzhou. You can see from this map that Loochoo and Fuzhou did not orient themselves in the same way that Westerners do today. So at the top is the south, and at the bottom is the north. So between Loochoo and Fuzhou, they oriented themselves towards each other and not in the way that we understand maps today. That's how important their relationship was with each other. Another old map, this map was drawn in 1785 by the Japanese military scholar Hayashi Shihei. And you can see that even though he was Japanese, even he adopted the Loochooan worldview for this map of Loochoo. I have added my own annotations to the map so that you can understand it better. So this is the historic Loochooan world orientation. Loochooans almost always oriented ourselves facing China, towards China. We oriented ourselves in relation to China because throughout much of our history, China was by far the most important trade and cultural exchange and political partner and ally for Loochoo. And you can see from this map that even the Japanese at the time considered Loochoo to be an independent country. They in no way considered Loochoo to be Japanese. And they also considered the Diaoyu or the Senkaku Islands to be part of China. You can see them here colored in the same color as China. So before the Meiji Restoration, even the Japanese always considered Loochooans to be their own country, and they also considered the Senkaku or the Diaoyu Islands to be Chinese. Taiwan at the time did not have a large Chinese population, but was still predominantly Aboriginal, which is why at the time Taiwan was not considered part of China, but was considered basically its own island country. It wouldn't be until later when a lot of Chinese people began to populate Taiwan, and so Taiwan became part of China, as it is to this day. Again, here's another historic map of Loochoo drawn by Loochooans. This map, though, only shows Uchina Island and the immediate surrounding islands. It does not include the Amami Islands or the Yaeyama or the Miyako Islands. But you can see here how Loochooans again oriented ourselves facing China. So even though Loochooans and Chinese, or specifically the people of Fuzhou, have had unofficial relations dating back to prehistoric times, this Loochoo-Chinese relationship became official during the Ming Dynasty. Loochooans dispatched envoys to the Ming court and requested that Loochoo become a tribute state of China. So a lot of people have this misconception that China forced Loochoo to pay tribute, which is not true at all. It was actually Loochooans who requested to pay tribute to China to become part of the Chinese tributary network because of all the many benefits that it offered. In the English language, the term tribute state implies something that's forced. It implies colonization and imperialism. But for historic Chinese tribute states, this was not true at all. China's tributary relations were consensual and mutually beneficial. So yes, Loochoo gave a lot of tribute to China, but China also returned the favor and gave many gifts to Loochoo. Because Loochoo willingly became a Chinese tribute state and adopted Chinese-style society and government administration, the Chinese considered Loochooans to be a trustworthy and respectable country. And so China recognized Loochoo as a sovereign independent nation, equal to that of the other nations. So the China-Loochoo relationship was actually a relationship between equals, although China was slightly more equal than Loochoo, which Loochooans never had a problem with because, let's face it, China is a much, much larger country than Loochoo. The relationship can be described as that between older brother and younger brother, or between father and son. So whereas some other countries might not like the idea of being slightly lesser than China, Loochooans have never had a problem with that because we're a small country and we have no problem being second place to the great country that is China. China gave a gift to Loochoo, this lacquer plaque here that you see hanging in the middle of Shiremun, which is the famous gate that stands outside of Shuri Castle in Okinawa. This plaque here says Chuzan in the Okinawan language. The name Chuzan referred to the government administration at the time. There's a whole backstory behind that, but I won't get into that right now. But this lacquer plaque here that you see, yes, it does originate back to the Ming Dynasty, displaying the name of the country. After Japan illegally invaded and annexed Loochoo, they stole this plaque and put it into their archives up in Japan, and instead they replaced it with a different plaque, which you see hanging today. The new plaque is a very generic saying. It does not contain the name of the country. It's a very generic saying that basically says this is our country, and that could be interpreted in many different ways. So you can see the Japanese definitely had a political agenda when they stole this plaque, this historic plaque that was given to us back in the 14th century by the Ming Dynasty, and replaced it with their own plaque. To this day, Japan still has the historic plaque in their archive somewhere, and Loochooans have long been demanding for it to be returned, but the Japan government has refused to give it back to us. So trade was a huge part of the China-Loochoo relationship. Loochoo gave to China a lot of domestic items such as agriculture. Agriculture has really thrived in Loochoo as it does to this day. Sulfur, which was important for China because they used it for their gunpowder. Horses, the Chinese valued Loochooan horses for their strength and durability. Shells, Loochoo has always had an abundance of ocean products, and shells were valued by China, particularly in southern China where it was used as a form of currency. Lacquerware, Loochoo to this day is famous for our lacquerware. Textiles, another famous Loochooan product, as well as items that were imported from other countries and re-exported to China. China, in return, gave Loochoo many luxury items such as porcelain, jade, iron, silk, tea, technology, and a whole lot more. China also gave Loochoo Chinese ships and eventually taught Loochooans how to make our own Chinese-style ships. These were large cargo ships that could hold all these precious materials. And it's important to keep in mind that China always gave more to Loochoo than what they received in order to demonstrate their immense wealth and generosity. Loochooans were more than happy with this arrangement and tried to give tribute to China as often as possible. So this is the historic Loochoo Embassy in Fuzhou. It was built around 1474, and it stands to this day. Some Loochooans who were on their way up to the capital in Beijing, they would sail to Fuzhou, stop here, and then go by land all the way up to Beijing. Today, the Chinese government has turned it into a museum in order to preserve this historic landmark and our historic China-Loochoo relationship. In contrast, Japan destroyed the old Loochooan embassy in Japan, so there's nothing left of it today. Toshindoi. It's a very famous song. Toshindoi literally means the Chinese ships are coming. It's a celebratory song that's still played by Loochooans very frequently to this day. If you attend any Loochoo party or festival or other celebration anywhere in the world, chances are you will hear this song. It's often played as the closing song, the big finale, where everyone gets up and dances kachashi. So this song is literally a celebration of the China-Loochoo relationship. Historically, when Loochooans would see the Chinese ships arriving in Loochoo, they would get very excited. It was a cause for celebration because those ships carried with them so much valuable goods, as well as returning Loochooan sailors and diplomats and others who were gone for a long time. And the ships often carry with them Chinese diplomats and visitors who Loochooans welcomed, of course. So the song Toshin Doi is a good representation of how important this China-Loochoo relationship was to both sides, really. Here you can see the famous palace of the Loochoo Kingdom, Shuri Castle. Every year, the Shuri Castle Festival, they hold a reenactment of this historic relationship between China and Loochoo. So this is a reenactment of the Chinese ambassador arriving in Loochoo to pay his respects to the king of Loochoo. It's a huge celebration every year with hundreds of participants and thousands of spectators. In the upper left corner here, you see the seal given by the Ming Dynasty to Loochoo. It's written in both Hanzi and the Manchu script. On the left are pictures from Shikinaen, which is a historic Chinese garden built in Loochoo. And in the middle and right is Fukushu-en, which is a new contemporary Chinese garden also built in Loochoo as a commemoration of this historic relationship between China and Loochoo, or specifically Fuzhou and Loochoo. Even to this day, you can see a lot of Chinese influences throughout Loochooan culture, whether it's martial arts, karate, or as we call it in the Okinawan language, tea. That's the picture in the upper right. Below that is satandegi, which is also known as the Okinawan donut. It's a very famous symbol of Okinawa and of all of Loochoo. It was actually modeled after the Chinese dish kai ko xiao. And you can see Loochooan spirituality also contains a lot of Chinese influences, and Loochoo spirituality also in turn helped influence Chinese spirituality, including Taoism. Ancient Taoist philosophers were really fascinated with Loochoo, prevalent due to our longevity as well as our tendency towards peace and happiness. Loochoo style lion dance, of course, is similar to the Chinese style lion dance. Loochoo's famous shisa, similar to the Chinese style food dogs. In the upper left corner here, you see a picture of tafaku. This is a traditional Chinese style dance that is still performed in Loochoo to this day in the village of Nakogusku, Iju Nakogusku. The dance actually originates since at least the Ming Dynasty, but during the Qing Dynasty, you can see here Loochooans modified the costume to adhere to the Qing style of dress. Below that is a picture of hare, or Chinese-style dragon boat racing, which is still a popular sport in Loochoo to this day. And in the bottom left corner, that is a picture of Kuimi Wudui, which is a traditional Loochooan style of theater and is still performed to this day. Realistically, we could do a whole study just on Chinese cultural influences in Loochoo, but we have to move on for now. Here's another map. It was drawn either by the Chinese or the Koreans, I'm not sure which. It's a historic map that shows the historic worldview between these three countries of China, Korea, and Loochoo. These three consider themselves to be the big three of East Asia. Japan was not included because at the time Japan was practicing isolation, and they did not adhere to the Chinese-style worldview, so they were not considered part of the big three of East Asia. Taiwan also at the time was not included because, as I mentioned earlier, it was predominantly Aboriginal, and they also did not adhere to the Chinese style of government or tribute system. So both Korea and Loochoo were historically China's two most important tribute states, and although China had many other tribute states, it was really just these two, Korea and Loochoo, that remain very consistent with the tributary relationship throughout history since the Ming Dynasty. So Korea's history is actually very similar to Loochoo. Japan several times has tried to invade Korea and even illegally annexed Korea, just as they have done to Loochoo. The only real difference is that Korea has managed to regain its independence from Japan, whereas Loochoo has not yet been able to do so, even though we continue to try to. The China-Loochoo maritime trade network was very extensive, and I will be discussing the subject more in upcoming videos and lectures and articles. But you can see they did a lot of trade, not only in East Asia, but also throughout Southeast Asia as well. And with that trade also came a lot of cross-cultural exchange. Chinese and Loochooan culture was spread throughout Southeast Asia, and in turn, Southeast Asian culture was also spread through China and Loochoo and all the way up through Korea and even Japan. The China-Loochoo maritime trade network was so extensive that even 3rd century Roman coins have been found in Loochoo. That's right. Coins from the 3rd century with Emperor Constantine's face on it have been found in Loochoo. That's how extensive the trade network was. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how this history affects the present day situation and the present day geopolitical situation in Loochoo. So whereas China has always treated Loochoo with respect and admiration, China has never once invaded Loochoo or infringed upon our sovereignty or violated us in any way. China has never built a military base in Loochoo. In contrast, both the United States and Japan have continuously violated Loochoo's rights. They continue to hold a very large military presence in Loochoo against the will of Loochooans. So you can see the huge difference between the way China has always treated Loochoo versus the way the United States and Japan has treated Loochoo. For those of you familiar with internet memes, you'll understand these. If you're not familiar, I apologize. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, has this line where he says he respects the people of Okinawa. He respects the will of the people of Okinawa, continues to commit numerous human rights violations against us. So you can see this is Japan's version of respect for Okinawa. And in the upper right corner, you see an elderly Okinawan woman, my friend, Miss Fumiko Shimabuku, she's in her 90s, and she's still one of the leading peace protectors in Okinawa. She and many other Okinawans are harassed and forcefully removed by Japanese riot police on a daily basis. This is what Japan considers respect for Okinawa. It's really not respectful at all. Another meme which illustrates how Loochoo has always preferred China as a trading partner and ally over Japan. Loochoo has never liked Japan because Japan is always very disrespectful and flat out harmful to us. Whereas China has never harmed us in any way. Actually, China has really, really helped us in many, many ways. Unlike the United States and Japan, most Loochooans do not see China, or North Korea for that matter, as a threat. Most Loochooans have a positive, or at least a neutral view of China. Loochoo is not part of the Status of Forces Agreement between the United States and Japan. So that about concludes my presentation portion. I will be opening the floor to questions at this time between China and Loochoo. We have over 2,300 years of peace and friendship, dating back to at least the Ming Dynasty and probably even before that. We hope to resume and continue this historic friendship between China and Loochoo and promote peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region and really to the world as a whole. As promised, here are the historic Loochooan and Chinese primary sources I have used for this presentation. Thank you for your time.